The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor of the Yale Club when James Whitfield III said the word that would destroy his family's 90-year banking legacy. It was graduation weekend, May 1956. The most prestigious families in America had gathered at Yale University to watch their sons receive diplomas. Among them was Teddy Johnson, Bumpy Johnson's oldest son, graduating summa cum laude with a degree in economics. Teddy had earned it. 4 years of perfect grades while navigating a campus where he was one of only 7 black students. 4 years of proving himself twice as smart, twice as hard-working, twice as disciplined as his white classmates. And now, at the celebratory reception at the Yale Club in Manhattan, he stood in his cap and gown, talking with 3 classmates about their plans for graduate school. That's when James Whitfield III, drunk on bourbon and entitlement, walked over with his father, James Whitfield Jr., managing partner of Whitfield and Sterling Bank. "Well, well," James III slurred, eyeing Teddy's honor cords. "They're really letting anyone graduate with honors these days." Teddy's classmates went quiet. One of them, a kid named Robert from Boston, tried to intervene. "Come on, James, not today." But James III was on a roll, emboldened by his father's presence and the alcohol in his system. "No, seriously, what's next? They gonna let a ninner run the Federal Reserve?" The entire reception area froze. Teddy stood perfectly still, his face expressionless, a skill he'd learned from his father. Never let them see you hurt. Never let them see you angry. Control the situation by controlling yourself. But James Whitfield Jr., instead of apologizing for his son, actually laughed. "James has a point. Yale's standards have certainly evolved. In my day, we maintained certain traditions, certain exclusivities." He looked directly at Teddy, his eyes cold with casual contempt. "No offense intended, of course. I'm sure you're very capable for your people." Teddy's classmate Robert stepped forward, his face red with anger. "Mr. Whitfield, that's completely out of—" "Robert, mind your business," James Jr. cut him off. "This is a private conversation between men who understand how the real world works." He turned back to Teddy. "Here's some advice, son. Whatever dreams you have about working on Wall Street, about breaking into finance, about making it in our world, forget them. We don't hire your kind. We don't promote your kind. We certainly don't let your kind manage money. So take your little diploma and find something appropriate. Maybe your father can get you work in Harlem." Teddy finally spoke, his voice calm and measured. "My father is Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Maybe you've heard of him." James Jr.'s expression didn't change. "I've heard of him, a gangster, which proves my point exactly. Go back to Harlem where you belong." Teddy nodded slowly once. Then he carefully removed his honor cords, folded them, and placed them in his pocket. "Gentlemen," he said to his classmates, "excuse me, I need to make a phone call." He walked away with perfect composure, leaving the Whitfields laughing behind him. But Robert watched Teddy go with a growing sense of dread, because Robert had met Bumpy Johnson once, when he'd visited Teddy at Yale, and Robert had seen something in Bumpy's eyes that terrified him. The same expression he'd just seen in Teddy's eyes. Not anger, calculation. Hour 3. Teddy arrived back in Harlem at the townhouse on Edgecombe Avenue. Bumpy was on the terrace reading the newspaper and smoking a cigar. He looked up when Teddy walked out, still in his cap and gown. "How was the reception?" Teddy sat down across from his father and told him everything, every word, every insult, every dismissal. When he finished, Bumpy carefully folded his newspaper, set down his cigar, and looked at his son with an expression that made Teddy's blood run cold. "Teddy, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I spent 4 years staying out of your business at Yale. I didn't pull strings. I didn't make calls. I didn't use my influence to smooth your path. You know why? Because you wanted me to earn it on my own. That's right. I wanted you to prove that a black man with brains and discipline could compete with anyone, and you did. Summa cum laude, economics degree from Yale. You're 22 years old and you're smarter than 99% of the white boys who had every advantage handed to them." Bumpy stood up, walked to the terrace railing, looked out over Harlem. "But here's what I also wanted you to learn. That no matter how smart you are, no matter how hard you work, no matter how many honors you earn, there will always be men like James Whitfield who think your last name and your skin color matter more than your achievements." He turned back to Teddy. "Now, tell me everything you know about Whitfield and Sterling Bank." Teddy's eyes widened. "Dad, I don't want you to. Tell me." So Teddy did, because he was an economics major who'd studied the banking industry extensively, and he knew things. Whitfield and Sterling Bank was one of Wall Street's oldest institutions, founded in 1866, managed family fortunes, corporate accounts, and trust funds for America's elite. James Whitfield Jr. was the third generation to run it. The bank was conservative, traditional, and, according to rumors Teddy had heard from his finance professor, increasingly over-leveraged in post-war real estate investments. "Over-leveraged how?" Bumpy asked. "They've been buying up commercial properties across Manhattan, using client funds to finance the purchases. If real estate values drop, or if multiple clients withdraw funds simultaneously, they could face a liquidity crisis." Bumpy smiled. Not a happy smile. A predator's smile. "Good. What else?" "Their biggest client is the Vanderbilt Trust. $8.2 million in assets managed exclusively by Whitfield and Sterling. If they lost that account, they'd collapse." "Probably." Bumpy walked back to his chair, picked up his cigar, took a long draw. "Teddy, I'm going to teach you something they don't cover in economics classes at Yale. I'm going to show you that in the real world, intelligence matters more than pedigree, strategy matters more than tradition, and a Harlem gangster's son can destroy a Wall Street dynasty in 72 hours. He picked up the phone. "Memphis, get everyone together. We're going to war." But this wouldn't be a war fought with guns or violence. This would be a war fought with financial precision that would make Whitfield and Sterling's collapse look like an act of God instead of an act of Bumpy Johnson. Day 1, Hour 6. Bumpy made his first call to a man named Solomon Rothstein, nephew of Abraham Rothstein, who'd helped Bumpy with the Tiffany situation years earlier. Solomon was a lawyer who specialized in estate management for New York's wealthiest families. "Solomon, I need information about the Vanderbilt Trust. Who manages it? What are the terms, and how easily can it be moved?" "Mr. Johnson, that's confidential client information. Solomon, your uncle and I have an understanding. I'm asking for a favor, a big one." There was a pause. Then, "What's this about?" Bumpy told him everything that had happened to Teddy. Another pause. Then Solomon's voice came back, hard with anger. "Those bastards, give me 2 hours." 2 hours later, Solomon called back with a full report. The Vanderbilt Trust was indeed managed by Whitfield and Sterling, but the current trustee, Harold Vanderbilt III, was unhappy with recent returns. The trust had grown only 4% last year, while the market had grown 12%. Harold had been quietly exploring other management options. More importantly, the trust agreement had a clause allowing the trustee to move assets with only 30 days' notice if certain performance benchmarks weren't met. Those benchmarks hadn't been met in 3 consecutive quarters. "Can you get me a meeting with Harold Vanderbilt?" Bumpy asked. "That's complicated. Harold doesn't typically meet with black men." "Yeah, I've noticed. That's a pattern. But here's the thing, Solomon. You're going to tell Harold that you represent an anonymous client who wants to discuss alternative trust management. You're going to tell him this client has resources that could significantly improve his returns. You're going to get me in that room. And if he asks who the client is, tell him it's someone who makes James Whitfield look like a child playing with Monopoly money." Day 1, hour 12. The meeting happened at Solomon's law office in Midtown, neutral territory. Harold Vanderbilt III arrived expecting to meet some mysterious financier. Instead, he found Bumpy Johnson sitting behind Solomon's desk, wearing a $2,000 suit and reading a detailed analysis of the Vanderbilt Trust's performance over the last 5 years. Harold's face went white. "What is this? Solomon, what's going on?" "Sit down, Mr. Vanderbilt," Bumpy said calmly. "We need to talk about your money. I don't do business with criminals." "No, you do business with James Whitfield, who's been underperforming the market for 3 years while collecting management fees that have cost you approximately $380,000 in lost growth." He slid a detailed financial analysis across the desk. "I had my people run the numbers. If your trust had been with any competent manager, you'd have an additional $380,000 right now. That's the cost of your loyalty to the Whitfield family." Harold picked up the analysis, his hands shaking slightly as he read. "Where did you get this information?" "I have good accountants, better than Whitfield's apparently. Even if this is accurate, I can't just move $8 million based on..." "Based on what? The word of a gangster?" Bumpy leaned forward. "Mr. Vanderbilt, let me tell you something. My son just graduated summa cum laude from Yale with an economics degree. He's smarter than anyone at Whitfield and Sterling. He's more disciplined, more driven, more capable. And James Whitfield called him a nigger at his own graduation reception. James Whitfield Jr. told my son he'd never work on Wall Street because of his skin color." Harold shifted uncomfortably. "So here's my offer," Bumpy continued. "You move your trust to a different manager. I don't care who. Pick anyone with better returns than Whitfield. Do it within 30 days as your contract allows. And in return, I'll make it worth your while." "Worth my while how?" Bumpy pulled out another document. "I control 17 businesses in Harlem, legitimate businesses. They generate approximately $2.3 million in annual revenue. I'm willing to sell you a 10% stake in the collective holdings for $150,000, roughly 65% of fair market value. After 1 year, if you're not satisfied with the returns, I'll buy it back for what you paid plus 8% interest." Harold stared at the offer. "You're giving me a discount on a stake in your businesses just to hurt Whitfield and Sterling." "No, Mr. Vanderbilt. I'm giving you a better deal than Whitfield ever has because I want you to understand something. Intelligence, capability, and good business sense have no color. My businesses are profitable because I run them well. My son would be an asset to any Wall Street firm because he's brilliant. And James Whitfield's biggest mistake was thinking his last name matters more than competence." Bumpy stood up. "You have 24 hours to decide. Move your trust or don't. Buy into my businesses or don't. but I'm giving you the opportunity to make money while teaching the Whitfields a lesson about respect. And if I say no, then you keep losing money with Whitfield and Sterling. Your choice. Day 1, hour 20. Harold Vanderbilt went home and did something he should have done years ago. He actually analyzed his trust's performance against market benchmarks. The numbers didn't lie. Whitfield and Sterling had been underperforming consistently. His trust should be worth nearly $9 million. Instead, it was worth $8.2 million. The Whitfields had been coasting on reputation while providing mediocre results. Day 2, hour 10. Harold Vanderbilt called Solomon Rothstein. I'm moving the trust. Draft the paperwork. And the investment in Mr. Johnson's businesses? I'll take that too. If a Harlem gangster can outthink Wall Street's finest, maybe it's time I stopped being such a snob about where I invest. But Bumpy wasn't done. Not even close. Day 2, hour 14. While Harold Vanderbilt prepared to move his $8.2 million, Bumpy made his second move. He called a reporter named Margaret Chen at the Wall Street Journal, a financial journalist who'd broken several major banking scandals in the previous decade. Miss Chen, I have a story for you. I don't write about organized crime, Mr. Johnson. This isn't about organized crime. This is about banking fraud. That got her attention. Bumpy spent the next hour providing Margaret with detailed information about Whitfield and Sterling's real estate investments, including the fact that they'd been using client trust funds to purchase properties without proper disclosure. Where did you get this information? Margaret asked. I have good sources. What Bumpy didn't tell her was that his sources included 3 employees at Whitfield and Sterling, a janitor, a secretary, and a junior analyst, all black, all underpaid, all happy to provide information to the man who'd helped their families over the years. This is explosive, Margaret said. If I can verify it, you can verify it. Check the property deeds filed in Manhattan over the last 3 years. Cross-reference them with Whitfield and Sterling's client statements. The pattern will emerge. This could destroy the bank. That's the idea. Why are you doing this? Bumpy told her what had happened to Teddy. Every word, every insult. Margaret was silent for a long moment. Mr. Johnson, I'm Asian American. I've been told I don't belong in financial journalism more times than I can count. I've been passed over for promotions, excluded from meetings, treated like I'm invisible. So, you know what? I'm going to verify every single detail you've given me. And if it checks out, I'm going to write a story that will make James Whitfield wish he'd kept his mouth shut. Day 2, hour 20. Margaret Chen worked through the night, verifying property records, cross-referencing client statements she obtained through legitimate journalistic channels, and building an airtight case. By dawn, she had it. Whitfield and Sterling had used approximately $4.2 million in client trust funds to purchase commercial real estate without explicit authorization. The properties were technically owned by shell companies controlled by the Whitfield family. It wasn't illegal exactly. There were loopholes in the trust agreements, but it was unethical, potentially fraudulent, and absolutely grounds for regulatory investigation. Day 3, hour 6. The Wall Street Journal published Margaret Chen's story on the front page of the business section. Whitfield and Sterling under fire. Bank used client funds for family real estate empire. The article detailed everything. The unauthorized use of trust funds, the shell companies, the potential conflicts of interest. And buried in the 8th paragraph, a quote from an unnamed source familiar with the bank's operations, suggesting that this wasn't an isolated incident, but a pattern of behavior dating back years. By hour 8, the Securities and Exchange Commission had announced an investigation. By hour 10, 3 more trust fund clients had called Whitfield and Sterling demanding full audits of their accounts. By hour 12, Harold Vanderbilt's notice to withdraw his $8.2 million hit James Whitfield Jr.'s desk. The bank was in free fall. Day 3, hour 18. James Whitfield Jr. sat in his office, watching his 90-year-old family business collapse around him. The SEC investigation, the Wall Street Journal article, the Vanderbilt withdrawal, other clients starting to ask questions. His secretary knocked on the door. "Sir, there's a phone call. The caller says it's urgent." "I'm not taking calls." "Sir, he said his name is Bumpy Johnson. He said you'd want to talk to him." James Whitfield's blood ran cold. He picked up the phone with a shaking hand. "What do you want?" Bumpy's voice was calm, almost friendly. "I want to make sure you understand what's happening, James. Your bank is losing $8.2 million today. The SEC is investigating you. The Wall Street Journal is digging into every transaction you've made in the last decade. Your clients are panicking. Your reputation is destroyed." "You did this. You orchestrated all of this." "I provided information. The fraud was all you. I just made sure people knew about it." "What do you want? Money? You want me to apologize to your son?" "Money? I don't need your money, James. I have my own, legitimate money from legitimate businesses. As for an apology, it's too late for that." "Then what?" "I want you to understand something. My son earned his degree from Yale. He earned those honors. He's brilliant, capable, and ethical, everything you're not. And when you and your son called him a slur, when you told him he'd never work on Wall Street, you made a catastrophic mistake." Bumpy's voice dropped lower, harder. "You assume that because I'm from Harlem, because I'm black, because my background isn't respectable, that you could disrespect my family without consequences. You thought your Wall Street connections protected you. You thought your family legacy made you untouchable." "Johnson, please." "You were wrong, because I just destroyed your 90-year-old bank in 72 hours. I turned your clients against you. I exposed your fraud. I made sure that every person on Wall Street knows exactly why this happened." "Why? Why would you?" "Because my son deserved respect. And when you didn't give it to him, you taught me something important, that Wall Street's biggest weakness isn't regulation or oversight. It's arrogance. It's the assumption that a Harvard MBA matters more than actual intelligence, that a family name matters more than ethics, that whiteness matters more than competence." James Whitfield was crying now. "I'm ruined. My family is ruined. Generations of legacy. Should have thought of that before you treated my son like garbage." Bumpy hung up. Day 3, hour 24. The final dominoes fell. The SEC's preliminary investigation found sufficient evidence to freeze Whitfield and Sterling's assets, pending a full audit. 3 more clients, collectively holding $3.8 million, filed notices to withdraw their funds. James Whitfield Jr., James Whitfield III, and the bank's CFO were arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of trust funds. The bank that had operated for 90 years collapsed in 72 hours, and across town, in a townhouse in Harlem, Bumpy Johnson sat with his son on the terrace, both of them reading the evening newspapers. "Dad," Teddy said quietly, "you didn't have to do this. I could have handled it." I know you could have. You're brilliant, Teddy. You're going to do great things. But I needed them to understand something. What? That the world is changing. That men like the Whitfields, men who think their last name and their skin color make them superior, their era is ending, and if they don't adapt, if they don't learn to treat people with respect regardless of race or background, they'll be destroyed. You think they'll learn? Bumpy looked at his son, this brilliant young man who'd faced racism at every turn and still graduated at the top of his class. Some will, some won't. But every time someone like James Whitfield falls, it makes the next one think twice. It makes them consider that maybe, just maybe, intelligence and character matter more than heritage. 3 months later, Teddy Johnson received job offers from 6 Wall Street firms, none of them willing to risk being on Bumpy Johnson's bad side by discriminating against his son. Teddy chose Goldman Sachs, where he'd eventually become one of the first black partners in the firm's history. Harold Vanderbilt's 10% stake in Bumpy's Harlem businesses returned 22% in the first year, significantly outperforming his previous investments, with Whitfield and Sterling. Margaret Chen won a Pulitzer Prize for her investigative reporting on banking fraud, and James Whitfield Jr. served 4 years in federal prison, where he had plenty of time to reflect on the moment his son's racism cost him everything. But the real legacy of those 72 hours wasn't the financial destruction or the criminal charges. It was the message sent to every boardroom, every country club, every exclusive institution in America. Intelligence has no color. Capability has no pedigree, and underestimating Bumpy Johnson, or any black man who's earned his place through merit, will cost you everything you have. Teddy Johnson went on to have a distinguished 40-year career in finance, mentoring dozens of young black professionals and helping to integrate Wall Street in ways that would have been impossible in his father's generation. When asked about his success, he always gave the same answer. I had advantages many people didn't. I had a father who taught me that respect isn't given, it's demanded and enforced, who showed me that intelligence and strategy beat privilege and pedigree every single time, who proved that you can come from Harlem and still outsmart anyone on Wall Street. And every time he told that story, he'd smile, the same predator's smile his father had taught him, the smile that meant, underestimate me at your own risk,